the DG of the NCDC, Chikiweka. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. Please give us an update. First of all, well done for all you have done. But then this concern is most certainly disconcerting. A second wave?
Thank you very much, Bobby. Sure. I think the key thing to remember is we through our collective action in Nigeria, state, federal, all of us, citizens, organizations, we have managed to prevent an explosive outbreak in Nigeria that many people thought would happen. 9 months into this global pandemic, and we watch the TVs every day to see what's happening in other countries. We have 60,000 cases, confirmed cases in Nigeria. None of us is celebrating that, but we have to guard those small bits of success very jealously. We have to hold on to it. How do we hold on to it? We have to hold on to it through our collective action. Yes, we have to reopen the economy. There's no doubt about that. Kids have to go back to school. Education is so important for all of us. As a parent myself, this means a lot to me, as it would mean to every Nigerian that has children, that is in a family. We've got to get our kids back into the learning environment. Just open creation, and we managed to do this fairly safely. Many people complain about a small inconvenience of filling an online form. But remember, the primary goal of the portal and our efforts was to prevent an explosion of cases when we opened our airspace. And that's exactly what we're now trying to do with education. We're working very closely with the Ministry of Education, with the state governors, and we have a meeting of NEC on Thursday where I've been invited in to again discuss these measures so that we reach some form of consensus on how to do this safely. So the bottom line is we've been fairly successful in preventing a huge outbreak in Nigeria. But those gains are fragile, and in order to protect them, while still reopening critical parts of our economy, we have to work with relevant stakeholders, schools, NYSC camps have to restart. We're working with NYSC to find a way of doing this safely. So these are all challenges for which there's no precedent, for which we have to work diligently to ensure that we do this safely so that we can manage our gains while still reopening critical parts of our country that we need to get back to normal, or to the new normal as possible.
Well, there are so many issues to deal with as far as education is concerned, and we'll take them on, Prestissimo. But there's also that thing that I'm sure will concern you as well. Protests going all over the place. You must be really concerned. What should we be doing to avoid that concern of PTF COVID-19, of a second wave?
Yeah, so I think the first thing really to say is every public officer in Nigeria should really take this protest, as I do, as a reminder of the sacred responsibility we have to our country, to serve diligently, to ensure that we're delivering for Nigerians, that we're delivering for young Nigerians. We're a country of mostly young people. So all of us have to be aware of that responsibility, and that people are now watching, and watching more than ever, on how well we're doing, how committed we are in organizing the teams working with us to hold that ethos of delivery, of of expertise that we are given by the public to deliver. So this is really the underlying message I get from the protesters. The police is just one institution. We all understand how difficult their job is, but we also understand how high the expectations are. Having said that, we saw from experience in other countries that had riots over the last few months, what happened subsequently. There was a price that was paid. Weeks later, we saw cases increasing in those countries after weeks of riots around social justice in many parts of the world. We want to prevent that situation here, while not taking away anything from the peaceful discussions, peaceful requests being made. So we have to find that balance. how do we get our message out there through the various voices, opportunities that we have, while still preventing a second wave of infections or an escalation of cases in Nigeria, because inevitably people come close together when these protests have been outside. That gives us some level of protection, but definitely not sufficient if we're really crowded in small spaces. So I really appeal to all young Nigerians. Your worries are legitimate. We are all concerned by consequences, and really I'm afraid of losing the very fragile gains that we've had. So this is really our advice from a health perspective, from a public health perspective at NCDC, while not taking away anything from the anxieties and disturbances and issues being raised by young Nigerians across the country.
All right. Now, of course, you say we have to strike a balance. So what should a protest look like in the COVID-19 context, especially for protesters who are going out today, maybe tomorrow? What precautions should be taken? Basically, what should they look like?
I think, the virus, remember, we're always fighting against a virus that doesn't recognize whether you are an elite or you're not, whether you're poor or you're rich, black or white, from north, from south. It doesn't. So it doesn't also recognize whether you're protesting or you're a policeman. Whatever side of the apparent divide you are, that virus is just looking for two people close enough to each other to jump from one person to the other. So we continue to advise, even in these difficult times, you would see some of the protesters, only sadly just a small proportion actually are trying. A few people are wearing masks, especially in the early days, wearing masks, trying to keep some level of distance between each other. So all we're saying is, listen, we can find a way, just like we've adapted our religious activities for COVID, we've adapted our workspaces for COVID, we've adapted sports for COVID. We also need to adapt our demonstrations for an era of COVID and make sure we do so safely so that we don't lose our lives in agitating for something that means so much to us. So my appeal is not to forget the very simple but critically important public health measures that we need to take, and we can take. It will not take away anything from our voices if we wear a mask and keep a little bit of a distance, 1 to 2 meters separate from each other, while still making our voices heard as we have been.
Okay, well, we look forward to seeing that. I know you have talked about a second wave, and for a lot of people, look at the testings we do daily. Not a lot of people are coming out to test, so you wonder, how will we even know when we're in a second wave? How do we stay ahead of that? But just to bring this home, what does a second wave look like?
And firstly, to say a second wave is not inevitable. There's no inevitability to having a second wave. A second wave really depends on our action. We're testing about 20 to 30,000 people a week. We wish we could do more, but we understand some of the apathy in the country. But also remember, the testing levels are not the same in the different states. Yes, because of time and circumstance, we present only the national figures every day. But every Wednesday, we report on the testing rates per state. I'd really like yourself and other journalists to pick up our situation report on Wednesday, highlight the states that are doing very well. Some states have done a great job, gone out there, tested, and they really understand where they are. There are other states that unfortunately haven't done such a great job. It's not for me to say anything about them. The data speaks for itself. We publish that every Wednesday. There are citizens living in those states. They need to raise their voices to say, listen, let's do more in our state. The leadership of these states need to take the bull by the horn, do what they need to do in these states to raise testing levels, to respond to the public health threats in their states, while we continue to provide advice, support, resources, technical expertise to support them. So I think my final point on this is Nigerians, this second wave, despite what is happening around the world, is not inevitable in Nigeria. A few months ago, everyone predicted doom and gloom in our country. Collectively, we rose, we did the right things, and we to some extent, have managed to keep the numbers low. We can do this again if we act collectively. And while still reopening our schools, we're working with schools and states, while reopening our airports, while reopening our NYSC camps. It's really how we do this. And with NYSC, with the Ministries of Education, we've come up with what we think is a fairly safe compromise between reopening and reopening safely and preventing an escalation of cases in Nigeria.
Well, and talking about reopening safely, just before we let you go, so what's the level of preparedness as far as the opening of primary and secondary schools are concerned? The PTF COVID-19 already gave out those guidelines for private schools, for public schools to reopen, what they must do. What's the level of compliance, and what are the things that parents and guardians ought to look out for?
Yeah, so we've put out guidance to help schools. We realize that, every schools are at a different level of development, of opportunity, of resources. So we've worked very hard to kind of find a balance, but we have stated what the ideal is. And right now really is the time for every school to, and the ownership of that school, be it federal, state, or private, to start working on certain basics. The school health programs that are almost non-existent in many schools. Sanitary facilities have not been really prioritized in many schools. So some of these things will take a while longer to re-establish. But we've stated what the priorities are, what the standards are, and we now want every school to thrive towards that. But also to remember, this is really not just for schools, right? This has to be a collaboration between society and schools, between parents and schools. And we've got to work together to achieve this safe reopening of our schools.
Very, very quickly then, the issue would be, how do we monitor compliance by the schools? Because as the Minister of Education said, once the cameras are not there, people seem to just take the law into their hands. So how do we monitor compliance with the guidelines put out by PTF COVID-19?
Yeah, compliance, the monitoring of compliance rests with the authorities that have those responsibilities, with or without COVID. States run state schools, the federal ministry runs a number of federal schools, the private schools are managed by state governments or the FCT. So it's through those same mechanisms. What we have provided them are the guidelines to do this. But compliance, means that, you want to talk about compliance when you're talking about children and you have to do your enforcing simple things. We are really urging us that these are our children. So we've got to work together. Parents, teachers, associations, parents at home educating their children on why these measures are necessary. Why you cannot play as you used to play previously with your friends in school, and why your games have to be different. So that the child doesn't go to school thinking the teacher is wicked by asking him to sit 2 meters away from his friend. And so there's a lot of responsibility from the rest of society to educate children on why these measures are necessary. And parents have a big role to play here in how to educate our kids. So we really don't want to go down the enforcement road. We want to really encourage, nurture, and support schools to get to where they need to be to provide a safe environment for learning for our children.
Well, Chike Ihukazu, Director General, NCDC, thank you so much for your time and for your thoughts this morning, and good luck.